Well, how are you?
I am okay. A mixed bag, as they say.
Yeah, fair enough. Um,
Should I do a. Wait, should I turn myself on?
if you want to go on camera, you can, yeah?
Yes. On the Discord. So I have to turn it off here. Boom.
Okay.
Turn it on here. Uh, where are we? Here. I'm gonna. Here. And pop up. Then I'm gonna click.
Here we go.
Yes. This is me. Uh,
Hello there.
yes. Should I do an introduction to who I am and what I do?
Yes, yeah, tell us a bit about yourself.
Yes. So, uh, my name is Lucy Hadze. I'm the biggest Polish trans streamer that also is Jewish. But
Nice.
I'm only the biggest Polish trans streamer because I'm basically the only Polish trans streamer.
Well, you don't need to mention that bit, just flex. No, it's all good.
I see. So that is my situation, and
Awesome.
and I've had a couple of topics with you for today, if you remember.
Yes, you said you wanted to talk to me about some stuff, yeah?
Yes, because I've seen your debate with Lonerbox about Israel Palestine, which is quite timely considering what is happening right now.
Yes, indeed so, indeed. So, what was your take on that debate?
Well, my take was I more took a position of a person that just because as bad as it reflects on my Jewishness, my knowledge of the conflict lacks. You know, I've an
Okay.
I have a lacking amount of knowledge when it comes to the.
Well, I don't think it's incumbent upon you as a Jewish person to necessarily know anything. That's
It's
not.
I much know I know much more about the Ukraine Russia conflict, but
Well,
so
that makes sense because I mean, you obviously in being in Poland, you live in a bordering nation to Ukraine, and
yeah.
it's affected Poland enormously. Whereas you're not from Israel, so why would you necessarily know about it? It seems like an odd pressure to put on Jewish people around the world that they have to know or even care about what's going on in one tiny little place in the Middle East. You
Yes,
know?
I guess.
Yeah.
So basically, I just commented on what I saw in the debate itself.
Yes.
If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
And my I had thoughts on things like, for example, when Lonerbox present, you talked about a quote,
Right.
and basically my thoughts on the quote was that the added context did not really change anything, did not make the
Ah.
quote any
Yeah.
better.
So you're referring to the Isaac Herzog quote about
Yeah,
there being
there being
billions, yeah.
innocent civilians, because from my perspective, sort of, and I'm not. I talked to Lonerbox about it as well. I told him as much, you know. I told him basically
Yeah.
the same thing, that from my perspective, the quote is saying, with the added context, that yes, you are innocent, but talking to a hypothetical civilian, you are
Yeah.
innocent, but because your kitchen hosts a missile that is directed at me, basically, I have to kill you. Tough luck,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, exactly. That I mean, that was sort of my take on it as well. That the added context doesn't make him seem any less like he's going to murder civilians.
Yeah, because it just says,
Yeah.
basically this sort of attitude of, we'd love not to kill you, but it's out of our hands. We have to defend ourselves against your kitchen missile,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, exactly. And actually, that's like as you say about it being timely with what's happening right now, which is obviously an ongoing thing. But the peace treaty or the ceasefire deal, which Israel has rejected,
Yeah,
and is now saying that it's begun to attack Rafah.
Rafa, yeah.
Um, but whilst pretending that they're like going in there to evacuate civilians. So basically, they're saying if you happen to still be there and we kill you, it's your fault.
Yeah,
Which isn't that's just murder with extra steps.
yes. That's what it seems to me, even if with my small knowledge of the conflict. And there has been also this aspect of uh, the so not the commemoration of the Holocaust to sort of um, use it as a rhetoric device to excuse continuing the war. I'm not sure
Yeah,
if you're.
absolutely. Yeah, no, I'm very familiar with that. Yeah, they use the Holocaust, ironically, as a shield to do genocide
Yeah, I
against other
mean
people.
specifically this year's
Yeah,
sort of commemoration, there was a speech, I think, by Netanyahu
yeah.
about it. How he said
What
that never again is now and it has to continue because what happened in the Holocaust.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, they are using the Holocaust as a in a really disgusting way, which betrays the memory of the people who lost, and indeed the people who survived the Holocaust. Um, it betrays them entirely by using their memories as a way of continuing to do genocide against a different set of people. The famous phrase is "never again,"
Yeah, which
and
is
yet
which
the
feels
people
strange to use it in this context.
exactly, yeah. The people, unfortunately, in the Israeli government who say things like "never again" are the ones making sure that never again it doesn't come to pass because they're literally doing the same basic crime, albeit on a lesser scale, of course. Than that's something, I guess. But yeah,
Well, I
they're
mean,
basically
it's
committing the same
genocide.
crime.
Is the question of genocide is not
Yeah.
exactly a question of scale because if a group is small, then the group is small. It's
No, no, no. Well, when on a scale, it's not just the number of people; it's the way in which it's being done. It's not the same mechanized process.
yeah,
So I
but
understand that it's
genocide
like
also is each genocide is unique,
historical. Yeah,
right?
it's. I'm merely sort of trying to head off any criticism from people who would say that the two are equivalent. They are equivalent on a moral level, of course, but they're not exactly the same process. There's a historical nuance there, which I think is worth just
We
commenting upon. But
probably
it just
would not look. We wouldn't probably dismiss the Rwanda genocide just because it was done by people
no,
going
exactly.
out with machetes and chopping people up to bits, right?
Absolutely, yeah. No, you're completely correct. Yeah, genocide is an evil, regardless of how it's done or the number of people killed. Yes.
It's like oh, there were many. Of course, there were also things that I said about what you said. Those, although they were a bit technical nitpicks, you could say. You know.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, what did you have critique of my
I
my
mean, I
position?
guess the main critique I had during the whole watching of the debate was
Hmm.
at times I said that Loner Box could just respond to what you're saying by saying I agree those things are war crimes and Israel should be held responsible, but we've established that these are war crimes, but not necessarily that there's a genocide happening.
Yeah, I mean, I tried to go through with Loner Box the various ways in which the definition of genocide at the UN had been met. That
Mm-hmm.
the first three of I mean, I considered that four and five of the five main points wasn't really applicable, but it doesn't have to be. You only have to break one of them,
Yeah.
and I think I pretty conclusively showed that Israel was guilty of breaking number one, two, and three of the criteria that are used under international law. You know, that's how the Convention on Human Rights is written because of that,
I
or
mean that is
based
the
upon that.
main that is basically the only genocide definition that is being discussed, the UN Convention
Exactly. Yeah.
from
Yeah.
Rafał Lemkin.
Well,
Um,
that's unfortunately the problem is Lemkin wanted a slightly more broad definition. He
yes,
wanted to include things like
I'm.
um, ethnic displacement, which is,
He
I think, an
wanted.
absolutely crucial part of genocide that isn't within the context of the thing. And at
He
least in part, on a historic level, it's at least in part because the three main powers who founded the United Nations, that being America, Britain, and the Soviet Union, didn't want that
We're not
particular part
happy.
in there.
Well,
because
they also,
they were all guilty of doing that, and so
yes,
if they allowed that as part of the genocide convention, they would open themselves up to
criticism.
potential criticism on the basis that they had all been guilty of doing that precise
Because
thing.
of course, many things that there are like there are a couple of aspects here. The USSR did not want the social and political groups to be in the convention because it was very much guilty of killing these groups. So it openly, uh,
Well, not just that, but even just on an ethnic basis, the removal of the Tatars from Crimea was
yeah,
ethnic cleansing.
yeah,
So that even if we concede the point about political or social groupings, just on a racial and ethnic basis, they were guilty of genocide. If
yeah.
you
But
include
they
that in the
definitely officially demanded that the political and social groups be crossed down, along with Saudi Arabia and I think some other countries, and it got crossed down.
yeah. Yeah, well, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
And there's
But
the
I mean,
aspect of
Britain was guilty of moving people from India to South America. The Americans had been guilty of the removal of native peoples from their lands. So they were all guilty of ethnic displacement
right.
genocide, which is why they didn't want it in there. You know.
But the uh, of course, as Karasus here says in my chat, ethnic cleansing is often used as a tool for perpetuating genocide. And of course, the US didn't ratify the convention during Lemkin's lifetime
Yeah.
because it knew that it was guilty of certain things.
And it's still not a member of a signatory to the International Criminal Court. And indeed, you even
Oh,
had
the US never
12.
ratified the Rome Statute?
They're not a member of the ICC. No, no, no.
Because that's
They don't.
ratifying the
They
Rome
don't.
Statute, basically.
Well, they don't. Well, they don't recognise the ruling of the ICC.
Hold on, let
Um,
me. I'm gonna
and they
Google.
literally there's
I
even
know
to the
that
point
Russia never
where
ratified it.
there is a literally a statute on the books that if an American is ever taken to the Hague, the US government is given pre-clearance to invade the Netherlands in order to retrieve their citizen.
Yeah, I heard about that.
Which is one of the most insane things I've ever heard, but it's a thing that happens. And you even had this week 12 Republican senators from America who threatened personally the head of the ICC that if they issued an arrest warrant for Benjamin Netanyahu, that he personally would receive sanctions from the United States federal government.
Really interesting. I knew that Russia never ratified the Rome Statute, but I did not know that the US did not as well.
Yeah, the American government have never accepted the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, albeit that it has supported some of the rulings based upon people like Slobodan Milosevic and the prosecution of Radovan Karadzic from Serbia.
The
But
US,
it's never formally accepted the jurisdiction of the ICC.
the
Yeah.
US participated in the negotiations that led to the creation of the court. However, in 1998, the US was one of the only 7 countries, along with China, Iraq, Israel, Libya, Qatar, and Yemen, that voted against the Rome Statute. Interesting.
But that's some interesting bedfellows that they have there in Qatar and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah,
Yeah. I don't know
Russia did the.
if you want to be a promoter of human rights and the rule-based order around the world, I don't know that you want to be sat next to Qatar and Saudi Arabia, really.
Well, Russia did the symbolic thing. They signed it, which basically means nothing, and never ratified it. And then, interestingly enough, I think in 2016 ish,
Yeah.
when the ICC said that they were looking into Crimea and it's suspicious and it seems like an occupation, Russia immediately withdrew from the signature of the Rome Statute.
Unbelievable stuff. Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, you bring up the Russian occupation of Crimea and obviously now of eastern Ukraine. Unfortunately, there's an interesting similarity, or I suppose juxtaposition, between the way in which people in the West have treated Vladimir Putin and the Russian occupation of those lands, and the way in which they will happily support Israel doing similar things in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank.
Yes. Well, to me personally, the Gaza thing has a. Well, I live in Warsaw, and you probably know that Warsaw was.
Warszawa. Yes.
Yes, you probably know that Warsaw had a place in it called the Warsaw Ghetto.
Oh, I'm very aware. I studied the Holocaust as part of my university
Oh, yes, you're
course.
a
Yeah.
historian, yeah?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think I put down well, both the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising and the Warsaw Uprising later on are two of the greatest examples of human bravery that I can think of in human history. I think they're amazing examples of unfortunately lost people, because unfortunately neither of them really succeeded in
Yeah.
as such for various reasons. But they,
Well,
in the face of evil, they stood up
there's some criticism to be
remarkably.
had on the Warsaw Uprising proper, but that's a topic for another day.
Oh yeah, no, it's obviously complicated and political and all the rest of it, but it's still a huge amount of human bravery that
Yeah,
went to
that's
waste,
right.
unfortunately. But there we go. Yeah.
And the
So
Ghetto
people are
Uprising.
asking me, can you drop your social media links in my Twitch chat so people can check you out if they want to?
Yes, I have YouTube.
Yeah, there you go.
Where do I like drop it in their DM?
You can do if you want to, and I'll
Okay,
post
I'm
it
gonna
in
drop it
chat
in
for people.
DM.
Okay,
YouTube
cool, cool.
and my page, the
Yeah.
the whole boom.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, by the way, I didn't even ask what are your pronouns in case
She
that
and
does
her.
crop up. She and her. Okay.
A trans woman that plays New Vegas on stream.
Good lord. Well, actually, on that point,
Of New Vegas?
no, of New Vegas, of being LGBT in Poland. We don't hear a lot of news, unfortunately, out of Poland, but that which we do seems to suggest a significant backlash against LGBT rights and stuff. So, as a person on the ground, what's your experience of being queer in Poland?
It's been very bad in when during the rule of the Law and Justice Party. The president of the Law and Justice Party ran on the slogan of the LGBT are not people, they're an ideology. And it's slightly better under the new government of the coalition that sort of drove out the Law and Justice Party.
Yeah, Donald Tusk is back, I
Donald
believe.
Tusk, yeah.
Yeah,
That's right. You're pronouncing it correctly. Not Tusk. Tusk.
Tusk. Yes.
Yes.
Just because I've heard Polish people say it. That's all. Like I can't claim to have done that on my own. Yeah. Where did you post those links? Because they've not come through to the
I think no.
Discord. No.
Did I not?
I can't-
Oh
I can't.
no, sorry. I DM'd it to the wrong person.
Of
course.
Fair enough.
That is so
That's
classic.
fine. That's
That
fine.
is so classic me.
Yeah. Thank you, Bilderberg, by the way, for gifting 5 memberships on YouTube. Much love.
But
yes. Okay.
the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, the one that was basically, it was not an uprising as such as choosing the place of dying.
Yeah. Basically, yeah.
But I, from the beginning of this conflict, which I admittedly know not enough about, I've had the feeling of, well, even before the conflict to begin with, as a person living in Warsaw, it makes me feel a bit weird, the concept of people being walled off and then certain things being sort of cut off from them, because that sort of makes me think of the mentioned ghetto.
Yeah, I mean, essentially, the Gaza Strip has been basically a ghetto, yeah, where people can't come in and out at will. The amount of food and aid getting in is controlled exclusively by the Israeli government and, to a degree, the Egyptian government, although they essentially have operated as a proxy of the Israeli government in this regard, unfortunately, rather betraying their Arab brethren. But regardless, so yeah, it's basically been an open air prison.
It feels
much
like the countries
the-
that surround Palestinian people never really cared to be brethren to them or allies in any sense of the word.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think people will look back upon the betrayal of the Arab world of governments like Saudi Arabia and Egypt and various other places in the nearby region who have, for short-term financial expedience, allied themselves with the government currently murdering Arabs. That's not an acceptable situation,
Like
and
the
history
West
should
Bank
view
was
them very poorly.
basically annexed. No, at
The West
one
Bank
point.
parts of it have been occupied, and actually, that's one of the underreported parts of the current conflict is
Oh
that
no, I'm
whilst
thinking
everyone,
before it was annexed by by Jordania. Yeah,
oh, but Jordan, yeah,
Transjordania
sorry, yeah,
Transjordan that became Jordan because it
yeah,
annexed. Instead of sort of helping establishing anything there, they just
yeah,
annexed
yeah.
it.
Oh, yeah, it's a complicated history with all kinds of imperialist endeavors. The fact that
Yeah.
there are weird
And
borders and
then
stuff that,
Egypt wanted to be basically also wanted to make Gaza a province of
yeah,
itself. Also
yeah.
by
I mean,
extension,
there have
but
been,
they
yeah, there's
wanted
been a
to
lot
be
of,
sort of they wanted to rule it, but without having any responsibility of actually taking care of it.
yeah, basically, yeah. The Egyptian governments over the course of decades, really, but especially the current government, are the government of uh, Hosni Mubarak was incredibly guilty of betraying the Arab peoples, basically,
And
especially the
as
Palestinians.
far as I understand, the Gaza historically, I've listened to a lecture about Gaza has been this sort of that the role of Gaza has been to be this in between place. So it was supposed to create a situation in which the borders between the sort of the land where Israel is now, the broadly speaking Palestinian land, and Egypt, the land where Egypt is now, right?
Yeah,
It made the borders more fuzzy, so to speak, and it was this in between trading hub that was supposed to be signify. It was supposed to be part of it was supposed to be outside of Egyptian border and part of it inside. It was to be
yeah,
this place where um, peoples from both sides would trade, exchange goods, and this sort of thing.
yeah. I'm not sure about that, to be honest with you. It certainly hasn't worked out that way. If
I
even
mean,
if that
that's
was the
been. I'm
intention,
talking
yeah.
about long, long past.
Yeah, yeah, a very long time ago, I
Like
imagine. Yeah,
when those places were forming, etc.
yeah,
And of course, there were
yeah,
many raids on this area, but you could say that this current situation is the opposite of what Gaza is supposed to be, isolated, since at least for a long time, historically, it depended on trade, which is
yeah,
now sort of, and from I understand, the other source of um, sustenance food was fishing for Gaza.
yeah, yeah. Well, it has obviously a Mediterranean coastline. Yeah, but yeah, yeah. Fishing was a significant part of their food intake and their economy. Yeah, and that's unfortunately the part of the thing that's not really discussed is that the economic development of Gaza has been enormously hampered by the fact that they can't really trade with the rest of the world when they're surrounded by a wall.
Yeah, and also by the fact that their infrastructure is basically in shambles now.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, their infrastructure's destroyed. It will take decades to get back to even where they were, and they were already in a bad state. But even to get back to that level, it's because there's been, for staff, there's been purposeful destruction of civilian infrastructure.
Right? Because the
Yeah,
whole idea was that there was the civilian shielding, which I'm not sure that is an argument that I accept as a justification for what has been and is going on.
yeah, no, I don't either. I don't think so. Yeah, we've seen there are probably are examples of tunnels underneath buildings, but even the cases where, for instance, the national university in Gaza City, which the Israeli government didn't even claim had tunnels underneath it, and didn't claim was being occupied by the by Hamas, was purposefully controlled demolition by the IDF.
Mm.
Why would you do that if not to make the conditions of life so difficult as to be impossible? Which is, by
Right.
the way, one of the definitions of
It
genocide under the
is. It
UN
is, and
Convention.
that was also one of my sort of criticisms in the debate, so as to um, as so
Yeah,
happens. I also voiced that criticism to Box when we spoke. That I feel like the discussion, the debate that you both had, focused on certain isolated elements like the
yeah,
food, the electricity, the water, etc. And it's
yeah,
okay and good to focus on the individual elements, but I feel it is also important to look at how those elements interact with one another, and even
yeah,
more importantly, what sort of picture do they create together. If you take water, electricity, food, the bombing, the destruction of the infrastructure, and all those elements, if you just sort of
yeah.
stack them together one by one, and observe what sort of picture for the people living there it creates, then you can start discussing, well, does that meet the point in the UN
Mm.
Genocide Convention?
So how would you have approached the conversation then if you were me?
Well, I would have done that. The thing that
Oh,
I
okay.
just said.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, that's a fair answer, I guess. Yeah.
You know?
I did for just to sort of reply or respond. I did try and bring in the different aspects of it, but I you've always got to bear in mind with a debate that you don't want to appear to be. Are you aware of the phrase "gish gallop"?
Yeah.
Because I realise that's not like a proper English phrase as such.
I'm aware
Yeah,
of the concept.
yeah, yeah. You've got to be wary not to do a gish gallop and just throw out a million things all at once to try and baffle,
Yeah.
because you seem like you've got something to hide. So when you try and add in the different elements and how they interact as a larger picture, it can sometimes appear that you're just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
So you've got to try and be sort of wary of that, because and that's part of the problem with debate as a concept, especially with sort of live streaming debate and not formal debates, is that it's not so much about who's right or who has the facts on their side, but how well they can craft a narrative, if that makes sense,
Mm-hmm.
using specifically the audience's
Participation.
perception of the arguments rather than it being necessarily about truth as such. It's about winning people over to a point of view,
Hmm.
which is I don't particularly like, but it's unfortunately a part of the political process. You know.
I see. Well, I feel like in this case it's sort of necessary to do when discussing a topic like genocide, because one element, like doing like, although in my opinion the response to a mm, terrorist organization existing within an urban structure, I'm not sure if bombing is necessarily the only possible course of action available to a state as a reaction to that. But I guess that's a different topic, right?
Yeah.
But I would say that it is necessary to say this one element might not do it, this one element might not do it, the third
Mm.
element alone would not do it, but if we combine them together, suddenly we get a
Yeah.
little bit
Yeah.
of a bigger thing that affects people collectively.
Yeah. I think so. Yeah. Um. So, you also said you wanted to talk a little bit about Ukraine, I
Yes,
believe.
especially
Yeah.
since there's a new topic that is about your country specifically.
Is it so? Okay. Yeah. What's that in relation to?
I'm gonna bring up the article
Oh,
because,
okay.
as it seems, we could even read it together if you want.
Yeah, I'm for okay with that. Yeah.
Let's see. I'm gonna look it up quickly, okay?
Yeah, no problem.
Do I have it open? Rob's waking up. Did you know that Article 7 procedure was ongoing against Poland?
Article 7. What's that?
The thing that sort of freezes IU members' ability to vote, etc.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yes, I do remember that. Yeah, there were sanctions placed upon Poland, weren't there?
Yeah, that's because Poland, under the Law and Justice Party, was breaking a lot of things.
Yeah. And actually, to be honest with you, I would argue that Hungary should be placed into those sanctions as well. I
Oh
think
yeah, Hungary is
the Orban
pretty.
government is not. It's not a democracy and shouldn't be in the EU.
Should I share the article via Discord or?
Yeah, if you put it on, if you screen share on Discord, it means it'll go onto my stream as well. So
Okay, so let's
that might be easier.
share your screen. Boom. It should be here. Here we go.
There you go.
Tabs.
Yeah.
So Russia warns Britain it could strike back after Cameron remark on Ukraine. Because Cameron said that UK weapons can be used on Russian territory, and it's up to Ukraine to decide whether or not they want to use it on Russia.
Yeah, that's interesting. Like, I was always under the impression that it was sort of behind the scenes that the UK and America and all of these countries that have been giving aid to Ukraine,
yeah,
were fine with Ukraine using them in that way.
Oh no, it was always considered escalation, and the U.S. has forbidden since the beginning of the conflict of using any weapons on Russian territory.
Oh yeah, that's what they say openly, but I mean like behind the scenes, like if you happen to send a missile over it,
Ukraine has not been doing it, so I assume Ukraine has sort of been hampered in this way for a long time.
Possibly, okay. But for an official, albeit an unelected official, because he's in the fucking House of Lords, but even so, the British Foreign Secretary to come out and say openly that that's okay is interesting, but I think does potentially risk a war, which I'm not sure that's
been a response from Russia. There's a response from Russia here.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I mean, naturally, like. Ironically, given that Russia is currently violating Ukrainian sovereignty, Russia does have a right to defend its own territory. And so, if you have a belligerent, and let's be honest, America and Britain are belligerents in this war, openly saying you can use our equipment to bomb you, that would be, I think, possibly a legitimate reason for them to declare war on Britain. Really, which I wouldn't want, and I hope doesn't happen, but.
So the article,
it would be understandable,
Moscow. Russia warned Britain on Monday that if British weapons were used by Ukraine to strike Russian territory, then Moscow could hit back at British military installations and equipment both inside Ukraine and elsewhere. And the question now becomes, where is elsewhere?
Yeah, where is elsewhere?
Is it in UK proper? Is it in European countries that host UK equipment and installation? What sort of countries host UK military installations and equipment? Because that is my question to you. Do you know?
I'm not sure, to be honest. I know that there are military bases where UK soldiers are based in Estonia and Latvia, I think, if I remember correctly. But I don't know if that's necessarily equipment or just mostly service personnel, and they train.
I mean, they
Baltic
said
nations,
could hit back at British military and installations.
Yeah, so that, I mean, they probably are talking about the military bases in the Baltic countries. Then I think
that would mean that could mean so.
They definitely want they want the Baltic countries back, and B, they've been doing consistently hostile maneuvers on the borders of Estonia for quite some time, haven't they?
They also want Poland sooner or later.
Well, they do want Poland as well, yeah.
At one point, they said Poland is next for denazification after Ukraine.
Yeah, it's
Poland's full
denazification is
of.
such a funny phrase for someone like Vladimir Putin to use. Like, motherfucker, if you wanted to denazify, you'd have to commit suicide.
I mean, Rusich. Rusich is the spearhead of the denazification effort.
Mm.
The famous neo-Nazi Russian unit.
Yeah, yeah, well, exactly. And they've been. I mean, we know that the Wagner Group have aided and abetted all manner of horrific groups in sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East, haven't they?
Mm.
Like the idea that Russia gives a fuck about removing Nazis from power is nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, any excuse is good to invade a country
Yeah.
that you want for yourself. So, British Ambassador Nigel Cassie, is that how I'm supposed to read the name? Nigel
Uh,
or Nigel?
where's oh, it's Nigel. Yeah,
Okay, British
Nigel
Ambassador
Nigel
Nigel
Casey.
Casey
Yeah.
was summoned to the Foreign Ministry for a formal protest after Foreign Secretary David Cameron said last week that Ukraine had the right to use British weapons to strike Russia.
In a sense, I can understand why Russia are upset about that, but in a way, it's kind of true. If we're to say that Ukraine and Russia are legitimately at war, which I think obviously they are,
They are.
if you're going to give weaponry to one side,
Then this side should be able to do
obviously they
whatever
can
they
use.
want with it.
Exactly, yeah. Like
It's
no one
war.
is saying, no one is saying to like the arms manufacturers who are selling to Russia that they can't use that weaponry in Ukraine. Of course, they're going to use it in
I mean,
Ukraine.
technically
If Ukraine
speaking,
wish to defend themselves via offensive means, then okay,
Russia
yeah.
is saying we're not getting anything from anyone.
Well, yeah, they presumably they print North Korean letters
Yes,
on their bombs by accident, I guess.
it happens to the best of us.
Yeah, yeah, no, absolutely. Who hasn't accidentally written Chinese characters on their missiles? You know,
True.
right? So,
It's an accident, but it's there's been this weird situation throughout this conflict from the very beginning where Russia could do basically whatever it wanted in Ukraine, bomb it, destroy key electrical facilities, bomb civilians, basically escalate endlessly. And
well, not just that, but like fucking fire live ammunition at nuclear plants. What the fuck
yeah,
are you doing?
yeah,
It's insane.
and and of course the whole dam thing, right? The blowing
Yeah.
up of the dam. But the West's hands are tied, basically,
Mm.
and any move the West makes is considered an escalation and dangerous, which is a very which creates this one-sided sort of escalatory thing when the West has to be constantly afraid of escalating in any way, but Russia doesn't give a damn at all.
Yeah, it's interesting that Russia would be upset that Britain would say this when we've literally had members of the Russian government joke about bombing Britain, literally dropping nuclear bombs on
Yeah,
Britain.
and
Like,
Poland and they've moved
yeah, I'm sorry.
Russia.
At that, you don't get to claim to be the victims in all of this when you're the ones. Like, the only people who talk about bombing or dropping nuclear bombs on people are Russian officials.
Yeah, and Russian state media spokespeople.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah.
But also that like the moving of nuclear warheads to Belarus, that's not escalation at all. But Poland
No.
talking about possibly hosting nukes, now that's dangerous escalation and will be met with consequences.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I mean,
And I'm surprised there's
The fact that Belarus changed its laws in order to allow that to happen, they're basically, why not just formally rejoin the Soviet Union then? Because you're basically just being ruled by Moscow
I
at
mean
that
Russia
point.
is taking active steps to incorporate Belarus into its borders, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, yeah,
But it's a very strange situation in which like I believe that West should also have its I don't know, at least at least when it comes to verbalizing it, there if you do this, that's an escalation from our perspective, and we will sort of do something about it.
yeah.
So that's
Right.
very, it's very, for example, in Poland, there has been a discussion among Polish people, at least in some circles, because there have been these incidents in which Russian missiles violated Polish airspace. I think you're familiar.
Yes. Yeah.
And there was the question, why don't we just shoot them down? Why
Well,
aren't we
exactly.
shooting them
Yeah.
down?
Well, exactly. They've constantly buzzed, I think is the phrase that gets used. They've constantly flown into airspace of other countries. We literally had the example in Britain last year of a Russian tanker
Hmm.
deliberately traversing into the Irish Sea,
Yeah, and
which
it's just
that's
why not
territorial waters of Britain. We have every right, if we'd wanted to sink that ship.
why not react? And the
Yeah.
answer again is that the West is afraid that there will be an escalation, which seems like ridiculous because it's Russia doing the violation.
Well, that's what I mean. But to be honest with you, I I
It's
know where
Russia
you're going with that,
escalating.
but I think it's actually the smart move to not take the bait because they ultimately Russia wants a the victim complex and b they want the moral the casus belli the reason to go to war of be having been attacked because they can say well look it's just a one plane flew into Finnish airspace or one ship went into British waters and they decided to overreact and kill our people or whatever.
The
And
question
then they can use
is,
that as a reason to go to war. So actually, let them play their silly games. They're not actually a threat to anyone in this regard. A couple of planes going into Swedish airspace or a
it's
boat going into Spanish waters isn't actually threatening those
to be quite
nations as
honest,
such.
to be
And
quite
so
honest,
don't
I mean,
don't rise to the bait.
y-
Don't take the bait that they're trying to
but
offer you
then
there. You know.
I don't know. Like there's this constant posturing how the European Union's uh, GDP, how the budget of the European Union dwarfs that of Russia, and
Mm.
considering how Russia is doing in Ukraine, with Ukraine being perpetually starved of everything, I'm not even sure if Russia is in any position to start a war with anyone else right now.
I don't think they'd actually necessarily do a great deal, but it would give them the opportunity to actually create problems. Like they do have a port in Syria, so they could attack Suez shipping. They could
But
attack.
they're having a very poor record of handling their own fleet, considering how much they've lost
Yeah,
to
I'm not arguing it.
Ukrainian
Yeah, I'm
soldiers.
not arguing. I'm not arguing it would go well for them. What I am arguing is there would definitely be a negative outcome for everyone involved, mostly for Russia, and that's sort of a problem because I don't want innocent Russian people to fucking starve to death either.
Right?
So I don't want anyone to suffer in all of this, and us starting a war deliberate or not deliberately us reacting to this silly provocation like it's much like with a child like you can react angrily to the child but that the child wants the response
But
the child
also
wants you to get
because
angry with it so that
there's
it can feel aggrieved and act out and again you can control the child ultimately but no one wins in that situation you
that's
know
the thing a little bit because it feels like the West, the so-called collective West, is so afraid of sort of taking the bait, so afraid of starting escalating in this way that there is no firm response to what Russia's doing, and so Russia, on the other hand, is emboldened to do whatever it wants.
I don't
In
think you can
Ukraine
argue that
specifically.
I, I know the argument you're making about like appeasement, right?
Yeah.
That if you just allow them to do whatever. But I think considering how well Ukraine has kept Russia in check, with, like you say, not enough support from the international community, especially in the last 18 months. Like the initial burst of support was really good, and then the Americans
Well,
have kind of backed off, and Olaf Scholz in Germany has decided to be a
aid
prick.
has
Viktor
been
Orban has been acting up. It's been unfortunately restricted in a way, but the Ukraine has still been able to hold Russia pretty decently in check. I don't think you can argue the West, especially the European countries, have appeased Putin. I
you
think Putin
sort of
and
can.
Russia are relatively well.
Like
chastised by the
there's
situation. Their 3-day military denazification operation has turned into trench warfare for two and
That's
a half
true, but
years.
there's a lot to get to here. Like the aid has been, in my opinion, in my personal opinion, lacking from the get go. The way the aid has been handled was not good at all. Like aid has been given in small quantities in this. Like there's been this comparison to a drip, you know, drip drip
Mm,
drip drip aid, and oftentimes the aid came too late when it could have been a lot more effective, and
yeah,
then it gave Russia time to sort of be able to adapt and respond much better than if the aid came when Ukraine actually asked for it and in the quantities they asked for it. And there's also like there's when it comes to the aid itself, there's a lot of to criticize the West for the fact that Ukraine is in perpetual need of anti-air systems. The European Union has like at least 100 of those systems and seemingly cannot spare even a few. You know,
yeah.
like
Who do
that's
you who who do you blame for this lack of aid, lack of support?
like the best, like the worst thing about there's no single party to blame here. Like
Oh yeah,
there,
no, there isn't one single party. But why do you think this has come to pass? What political forces are leading to that outcome?
well, part of that is that there's this constant fear of escalation. If we give too much, if we give too fast, if we allow this, if we allow that, then that'll be escalation that could lead to the worsening of the situation. That's been a common theme. Should we give this type of weapon, or will this be escalation? Should we give this type of tank? Will this be escalation? Should we give this type of missile?
True,
Maybe
but
we shouldn't give this type of missile. We should discuss it. We should deliberate on
is
it.
that not is that not just an excuse that's used though? Like I don't think that's the real reason that a lot of the reticence to give that kind of offensive military capability. I don't think it's about escalation because I think we've seen from it David Cameron coming out and just saying it. I think the European countries don't mind
I mean,
Russia
that's a
being
long
kind of
process.
defeated.
I think Europe
I
is
think it's
only
I
sort
think
of.
it's I think the excuse is we don't want to escalate. Like we see in America with the Marjorie Taylor Greene type people, they don't actually give a shit about, and they're not anti-war. Look at their support of what Israel is doing. Then they're clearly not anti-war. They're just pro Putin getting his
Yeah, they're
getting
pro
what he
Russia.
wants in Ukraine. Yeah. So it's for me, it's an excuse, a very convenient and plausible excuse at times, but an excuse that's used by people who, for other reasons, don't want to help Ukraine or do want to help Russia, that they use to get away with it. And um, I think a lot of it, unfortunately, is economic self-interest. I think if you look
There's
at the way
probably
in
some
which
of it here, yes. Especially since
Olaf Scholz has been very disappointing at times with the way in which he's the new Chancellor of Germany,
the
the way
Taurus
he has
missiles.
the way he has handled some of this does reek of self-interest over the defense of Ukraine and indeed the defense more
Of Europe.
broadly of peace in Europe. Yeah,
And there's been like the UK, for example. I've been getting notifications. I've talked about it on stream how the UK has continued to, even though the oil is sanctioned, the UK, for example, and probably other countries have been continuing to buy Russian oil via third parties.
yeah.
So that's a problem as well.
Well, that always happens, unfortunately. I mean, we saw with ISIS in parts of Syria and northern Iraq that we know that, let's say, illegally, agents within Turkey were able to buy oil and sell that on the international market, and we know that funding led directly into bank accounts controlled by ISIS operatives. These things, unfortunately, happen because oil is such a looked for commodity and such a high in demand and profitable commodity that people will always buy it regardless.
Yes,
There's no in
although
capitalism. There's no like moral to it. They want to make money. You know.
although if countries are serious about supporting Ukraine and defeating Russia, then they
Yeah.
probably should not fuel the Russian war machine at the same time.
Oh no, I quite agree. I wasn't Sorry, apologies, my lights fucked up. I wasn't arguing that what they're doing is good. I was just arguing that it's a thing that always happens.
And of
It's not a
course,
unique situation
as
necessarily.
I said, there's discussion in Polish circles, certain Polish circles, that went beyond why don't we shoot down Russian missiles when they reach the space of Poland. But more and more people have been asking, why are we not defending Ukrainian cities that are within our range? It would not be any sort of escalation since no Russian soldier would die, and we could be saving lives since bombing cities and civilians is not an acceptable thing in war to begin with.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think from the Polish government's perspective, they would be probably a little scared of accidentally killing Russian service personnel in
Well,
some
it's
way.
impossible if you just target the missiles that are used to bomb Ukrainian cities. It's physically impossible. There is no personnel involved. It's just missiles and drones.
Oh, so just missiles,
Yeah, if
not.
Poland
Oh, okay.
would use its
Yeah.
anti-air
Well,
to
I suppose you'd be in a better situation to explain that than me. Then I guess why have the Polish government what reasons have the Polish government given for not doing that?
well, that's probably part of the whole escalation thing. That's the only explanation why Poland would
Yeah,
not do it. Like they would be afraid that it would be taking part in the war.
yeah. I suppose it could be seen as intervening on one side,
But on the
even
other
if it is,
side,
even if it's just humanitarian in nature. If you're deliberately interfering with the offensive capabilities of one side, that necessitates you becoming, in some respects, a belligerent in that war, even
yeah,
if
but
defensively so.
then again, indiscriminately bombing cities is a crime. So that would be just
Oh yeah,
stopping a crime.
yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. I think the Polish government should do that, but I can understand from a legal perspective why they would be cautious.
Well,
But
I
that doesn't
guess.
mean they can't give, like, for instance, it's not even if you don't want to become a deliberate combatant, the
Hmm.
idea that just arming Ukraine properly is somehow a bad thing. And I'm not accusing the Polish government necessarily of doing that, because actually, I think if you look at the way in which the governments of Central and Eastern Europe outside of Germany have operated largely, I think they've been pretty good. The Baltic countries have been incredibly generous compared to the GDP
Yeah.
of those relatively small nations. If Britain or the United States even gave a tenth as much of their percentage of GDP, Ukraine would win overnight. I'm sure.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, the U.S. has given in aid a fraction of what it spent on its past conflicts,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
and
I mean,
still,
and that's part of the problem is the drip 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 just elongates the war.
yeah,
The USA and the West more generally, I think, should have made the decision at the very start. You either give in and don't do anything and save everyone the time and money, or you do the right thing and give enough weaponry
yeah,
to
to
Ukraine in
just
order to
win.
actually win. Because at the
Yeah,
moment, all you're doing is funding a stalemate, and it's just butchery. It's just trench warfare, like the First World War or something. It's
and
awful.
as much as the fact is that Russian soldiers lose more people, um, Ukrainian people
Like,
are also dying, and
yeah.
that
Well,
all could
firstly,
have been avoided with proper
yeah,
aid.
yeah. Russia has more people to lose, and they're prepared clearly to slaughter their own people in
Yes,
prodigious quantities, unfortunately.
and
And
there's
secondly, most of the fighting is happening in Ukraine, so every day it continues to happen, Ukraine gets broken down more and more.
yes, that
Where
is
while
also
Russia is being affected quantitatively in terms of its economy and stuff, but the Russian cities aren't affected by this by and large.
yeah.
Belgorod has been hit a couple of times, but most their infrastructure is absolutely untouched by this. Whereas huge swathes of eastern and central Ukraine basically don't exist anymore.
Yeah,
Places
and
like we saw at what was the port city at the Azov Sea? Uh, I've forgotten its name. Anyway, which was basically obliterated. And you look at it now, the city doesn't exist anymore. That was a place that had like a population of 400,000 or something before the war, and now
right.
it isn't. It doesn't fundamentally exist as a city anymore. It's just some piles of rubble.
Yeah,
Mariupol, thank you,
Mariupol. Yeah.
Mariupol. Yeah, it's not really
Although
a.
Russia brags about rebuilding it, but
Well, I mean, yeah, but who's going to go there?
Good question.
You know, it's
Russians, but
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, they'll just move Russians in
I
again.
mean they're already
Again,
doing it. But
another example of this kind of the dual aspects of ethnic displacement. One is removal of people who were already there, i.e., Ukrainians, and
Mhm.
replacement of those people via settler colonialism of your intended ethnic group. You know.
Well, the Russification happening in the occupied areas is ongoing. It's pretty bad, and worse things are happening. People are forced to
Well,
take
this is
on Russian passports.
yeah.
It's just
Well, this problem could have been headed off at the pass a long time ago, either by not allowing Putin to become into power in Russia in the first place, by accepting Russia into the family of nations after the fall of the Soviet Union, or even if you didn't want to do that, aiding the legitimate Ukrainian government several years ago
I mean,
in
in my
defending those
from my
eastern territories
perspective, aid should have
from
been given in 2014. That should have happened.
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Decisive help.
Yeah, I think it will be one of the failings. I think going forward of the memory of the Barack Obama presidency, that he basically stood by and allowed the annexation of Crimea basically unchallenged,
And
and
there's
the
the Donetsk and
the
Luhansk business.
yeah, exactly, yeah, that's the kind of point I was going to go on to. Those quote unquote people's republics, as they referred to rather
Yeah.
ridiculously by Russia, in eastern Ukraine. If the West had stepped in and given active assistance to the Ukrainian government to stamp down the weird ethnic terrorism that was basically taking place there and the separatist violence,
Yeah. And
this could have been headed up in the past a long
somewhere
time
around
ago.
here I have a newspaper dated 2014 that
Yeah,
actually talks about this. That basically, because there are many people that are pro-Russian shells that in either debates online or offline claim, but those had legitimate, um, what's referendums, and though they chose to be outside of Ukraine, they chose to be sort of their own things, and maybe even
yeah,
later join Russia. And
yeah,
there's like it's Poland did not have amazing relations with Ukraine in 2014, so it did not have any special interest in sort of lying about this subject, you know? And in
yeah,
the newspaper, which I just actually, ironically enough, just happened to lie here in this streaming room,
yeah,
which I inherited after my father died, uh, it speaks of leaked conversation between separatists and Russian forces, which spoke of doing a referendum, which sort of conclusion would be decided beforehand in May.
yeah, yeah,
And the separatists said, we're not ready. We might not be able to do this now. The government in Ukraine is getting stronger. We might not be able to pull it off. And the Russian side was like, what are you going to go with referendum, you know, cards from home to home? Just write 90%, 85%. Just do it. And then it leaked, and when it leaked, Putin sort of did this whole official thing. Let's do the referendum later, and let you prepare for a nice, fair referendum. So,
yeah,
you know, it's
yeah. Mad
ridiculous.
shit. Ridiculous. By the way, thank you, DJ Che, for raiding in. Everyone, hello there, everyone. Hit the follow button now. Anyway,
So,
yes.
so maybe it's
So,
just my Polish perspective, but
yeah,
being negative and pessimistic. But I just think all of this could have been avoided. All of this could have been, like,
yeah,
even forgetting about 2014 and getting into the whole full scale invasion. When in February, when there was this whole, there were meetings, there were marches all around Europe and the world, sort of commemorating an anniversary of the full scale invasion happening for a few years now. In Poland, the the basic thing that was said at the beginning of the march was, no, we're not here to commemorate the few years of the full scale invasion. This has been going on for 10 years. We've been meeting here from 2014, and it's not been just a few years. It's been 10 years, you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah, yeah, it's a point that gets made by pro-Russian people is they say, well, it didn't start in 2022, it started in X year, and usually they go on about the Maidan protest and all the rest of it. The one way in which they're correct in this is that you shouldn't think of the Ukraine war as having started in 2022.
yeah,
The seeds were way back in 2014 with the annexation of Crimea
exactly.
and with the fomenting of Russian ethnic violence in eastern Ukraine by obviously paid agents of the Russian state.
Separatists.
Yeah, separatist people in eastern Ukraine. Which, by the way, this could all have been if this was just a matter of natural Russian ethnic Russian people in the east of Ukraine doing their thing. This could have been solved very easily with maybe some sort of autonomous status for those
I
regions of
mean,
eastern Ukraine.
Crimea
Or
had an autonomous status, we have to
exactly,
remember.
yeah. There are ways in which you can ameliorate racial or ethnic tensions or religious tensions
And
in a
somehow it
country
did not
without
help Crimea.
yeah exactly without it being without it being turning into annexation by the kind of the protector of those people or the kind of ethnic group that
Yeah.
they're from.
So in reality, Russia never cared about these things, considering that Crimea was given this autonomous status and it changed nothing.
Yeah, it did. Phantom of Black, you raise a good point. Actually, it's very much like the Sudetenland in during the before the start of the Second World War, where if the German peoples of what was then Western Czechoslovakia,
Yeah, the
well, if
mountain
they were
ranges.
if they were being treated so badly, or if they were not seen as like being equal or whatever, you could give them semi-autonomous status, or you could even sort out an agreement whereby you have um, a dual
Shared
government
governance,
system,
yeah.
shared governance. Actually, which is the argument I have with the Falklands Islands, where Britain and Argentina could have a shared governance situation, which would at least take that problem off the board internationally. But regardless. You could have some situation like that, and if the Russian government were acting in good faith, they may have been able to negotiate
I
any
mean,
number of
this
these
is what I
different
believe should have
possibilities,
happened
but they
with.
weren't.
This
Yeah.
is what I believe what should have happened with Lviv, like after World War One, and Poland and Ukraine. But that's neither here nor there. You know?
Yes, there are people forget that Poland shifted 100 miles or so to the west after the end of the Second World War,
Yeah.
and that much of what we now know as Poland was either Germany or bits of what is now Ukraine used to be part of Poland.
Poland
It was a
and
complicated.
Belarus and Lithuania. And
Yeah,
all of that was quite complicated because Vilnius,
and
which is
and
the capital of
Kaliningrad.
Lithuania,
Yeah,
Vilnius,
yeah,
which
indeed,
is yeah,
which was a Polish city. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, but then again, that was a complicated matter because it was physically a majority Polish city. You know.
Yeah, well, there are still significant Polish minorities in parts of Ukraine, aren't there? Yeah.
So Lithuania, that's because I guess I would have to go into the whole Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Are you prepared for a speech about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth?
I am always prepared for a conversation about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Yes.
Yeah, are you well familiar with it?
Not
Yeah,
well
as a
familiar, but
historian.
I'm aware of its existence. Yeah, and it was the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, and then Poland didn't re-arise until like 1918.
Yeah,
Or
although
something.
I object usually against calling the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth Poland for various reasons.
Well, the Lithuanians, yeah. for a start.
Because, well, Polish people and Lithuanians, as we understand them now, did not exist when the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth existed. Because there was no notion of a nationality or a nation state back then.
Well, that's true of a lot of places, actually. If you look at
Oh,
Italy,
it's true for all places. But
yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, like in relatively recent history, like you look at Italy before unification, they didn't even speak what we now think of as Italian. Most of those people, they had their own regional languages and dialects.
so that's why I
And
sort
the
of
same is
object
true
to.
of France before Napoleon as
Yeah.
well. You know.
I sort of object to calling the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth Poland because it was a totally different entity altogether. You could very well make the case that the Polish Lithuanian Commonwealth is a shared heritage of Polish people, Lithuanian people, Ukrainian people, Belarusian people, as well as Jewish people, and many um, Armenian people and many other people that lived within the borders of this sort of the term is composite state.
Yeah.
You know, the union between the Kingdom of Poland and the Great Duchy of Lithuania, and there are historians that make the case that if the Rus or Ruthenian nobles played their hands better, if they showed more uh, active participation in the Lublin Pact that created the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, then we could have had a Polish-Lithuanian-Ruthenian Commonwealth from the get-go, which would have created a very different situation in when it comes to what the entity was and how it would relate to the rising power of the Russian state, which is
Yeah.
very interesting. There was an
Yeah.
actual attempt at the end of the life cycle of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth to create a Polish-Lithuanian-Ruthenian Commonwealth, but it's sort of too little too late and it did not succeed, among other things because of a Russian invasion that thwarted it.
Yeah.
You're
Well, indeed.
familiar
Well,
with these events, right?
yeah. Again, not in massive detail, but I'm aware of the general broad strokes of it. Yeah.
So it's
And
and some um, historians, interestingly enough, Ukrainian historians said that if we had that from the get-go, Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, then perhaps many things like the Cossack uprisings would not have happened, and then because the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth at the end of the day was a very important counterbalance to Russian power.
yeah.
So if there was this counterbalance in the region against Russian power, then very possibly we would not have been in the mess that we are now.
True, but I mean, European history is so weird and complicated that it's difficult to say what
Yes,
would have
difficult.
happened
Yeah.
at a million because it's so complex, and that was, I suppose, part of the problem with the self-determination after the First World War
hmm
was
So
that
this is
if you
uh,
gave self-determination to every single group, Europe would be 500 countries. It would be ridiculous.
right. So this is where we go to. This is where we come to the post World War One situation in which we had many different peoples that lived within the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which was not a nation state.
Yeah.
So different peoples that lived within the same country, within the same borders, said, "Hey, this part of this country should be part of our new nation state," and this created tensions between Polish people, Lithuanian people, Ukrainian people, which parts of the old Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth should belong to the new nation state, and that
Mm.
created
And actually, it led to a situation that was then used by Hitler in a very similar way to the way in which Putin used the situation of Russian-speaking peoples in the
right,
eastern Ukraine. That when
and
you had Germany in what was Poland with the corridor to the sea,
yeah,
um,
and
he used the
Kaliningrad was
excuse
of
of
course Eastern Prussia, to answer
yeah,
your
yeah, Königsberg, yeah, yeah.
Königsberg.
The the Germans inside Poland, he used their mistreatment, quote unquote, as
Yeah,
the excuse to go in and invade. Which again is very similar because in the same way that Putin just wanted to invade and didn't give a shit about the people, the Russian people of eastern Ukraine, Hitler wanted to invade Poland and didn't really give a fuck about the German-speaking people there either.
yeah, and of course there's the so the Ukraine-Poland war was a direct result of this sort of people in Lviv wanted to be part of Poland, but all people around Lviv were Ukrainian and they wanted to be part of Ukraine. And this sort of it becomes a question. So how do you resolve it? And in my personal opinion, of course, hindsight is 2020. The solution was to arrange of some sort of joint governance over Lviv of
Yeah.
Poland and Ukraine.
Well, that's, I mean, ultimately what would a sort of thing that would have to happen in Jerusalem as well with Israel and Palestine,
Mm-hmm.
because of course East Jerusalem is the only real place that the Palestinian people will ever accept as a true capital,
Mm-hmm.
and so you'd have to have a genuine split of that historic city between two governments.
I mean, this is all just theoretical talk, but since I like the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth as a concept, I was thinking that, of course, there's the animosity that you have to get over, and that's very difficult when it comes to Israel-Palestine situation. But a two-state solution in the form of a composite state, if you will,
Yeah.
separate but united within a framework of a union, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that's. This is the thing. If the problems are just political, if it's a
But well,
matter of
they're
just
not,
sorting out,
unfortunately.
well, exactly, yeah. But if it were, then these things can be sorted out. Actually, the example I would give from my own part of the world is Northern Ireland, which is itself shouldn't really exist as its own entity. But regardless, the fact that it was largely a political thing and it wasn't just a matter, like, obviously there are religious elements to it, but it's a political situation between the UK and Ireland, right? And so there's always a way in which the two sides can be put around a table and you can sort out a situation that people can live by. And now there is relative peace in a place that was a constant war for decades. And the
Yeah,
same cannot unfortunately be said of Israel because it isn't just a matter of a political solution. It's religious and ethnic supremacists trying to take other people's land.
yeah.
That's the problem, you know. Yeah.
Unfortunately, there is also the very real problem of these people killed my family, these people killed my, destroyed my
Oh yeah,
home.
there is a cycle of violence, absolutely. But like I say, with Northern Ireland, that same cycle of violence existed. The British government killed innocent people. The IRA killed people. There were loyalist terrorists that killed people, and that can be gotten around if there's A, the will on both sides to make something happen, and B, that there isn't an absolutist claim by one or both sides on this. Um, and that can be, then you can have a political solution to the problem.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, at the moment, there isn't that because, unfortunately, on one side you have the ethnic supremacists of the Likud party and their allies in the Knesset, who have the backing of the world superpower in order to do their evil, and on the other side you have a Hamas who can't really be negotiated with particularly well, can they? Because
no.
they're themselves violent, genocidal, mad cunts. And unfortunately, the innocent people in between are the innocent Israelis and Palestinians who've been slaughtered during all of this.
Yeah, and of course, at this point, well, I'm pretty sure that some people were saying that even before, but even pro Israel speakers, pro Israel uh, academics. I know this person who is a pro Israel war journalist, Konstanty Gebert. His nickname is Kostek. He wrote a whole book about genocide called Final Solutions, Genocide Perpetrators and Their Methods. So it goes through many different genocides. It was written before I think this conflict began, but um, even like people that are basically pro-Israel have a pro-Israel bent will say that the current Netanyahu government is a bunch of fascists. So that should give us a clue that something's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
right.
Did you did you want to not unshare the article? Are we finished with the article?
Oh, don't you want to read it till the end?
Oh, you can do if you want to, but we hadn't read anything for ages, so I thought you'd sort of
Yeah, yeah,
finished on the
because
point.
we've been like sort of, you know.
Oh yeah, no, go for it. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay. We've finished to strike Russia. Russia's foreign ministry said, wait, here. Major to Prishul to strike Russia. Russia's foreign ministry said that Cameron remarks recognized that Britain was now de facto a part of the conflict and contradicted an earlier assurance that long range weapons given to Ukraine would not be used against Russia. So this fragment says Ministry said that Cameron remarks recognized that Britain was now de facto a part of the conflict.
I mean, to be honest with you, I would argue that Britain and America have been really for quite a while.
Yeah, but
Like,
it's
I don't
not
know if that
been.
necessarily means that Russia should declare war or anything, because that won't end well for them. And obviously, I don't want to risk nuclear fucking annihilation. But yeah, we've been arming one side and sanctioning the other side, so pretty obvious where the loyalties lie.
No, that is true. Although I would say that the moral, at least, calculus is pretty obvious in this war.
Oh yeah, no, don't get me wrong. I don't think they've made the wrong choice. I'm just saying they've made a choice. You know.
Yeah. Casey was warned that in response to Ukrainian attacks on Russian territory with British weapons, any British military facilities and equipment on the territory of Ukraine and abroad could be targeted, the foreign ministry said. The ministry said it considered Cameron's remarks as a serious escalation. The ambassador was called upon to reflect on the inevitable catastrophic consequences of such hostile steps by London and immediately refuted the belligerent, provocative statements of the head of the Foreign Office in the most decisive and unambiguous way.
This is it. This reminds me of the way in which the Soviet Union used to literally talk. Is that they talk constantly about other countries' provocations, and
Yeah,
whilst doing many of the same things itself.
I mean,
It's
that
like
is.
their statements are so out of whack with reality. It's very telling. You
I
know.
mean, that is basically what I've said, that Russia feels that it can do anything, but any sort of action by any different party is seen as this escalation that cannot be permitted. And
Yeah. Exactly.
I think we don't see enough of this sort of thing on the Western side. Like, you're going a little bit overboard. You should take a step back because you could be heading to a situation which cannot be taken back. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Because there should have been a more firm response, at least verbally, to the whole Russian missiles in Polish airspace, because Polish airspace is NATO airspace, not just Polish airspace.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing with the Article 5 is pretty fucking unambiguous that an attack upon one is attack upon all, and I don't see why that doesn't apply to verbal threats as well. Ultimately, if the Polish government wishes to have missiles based on its border, I mean, undoubtedly it would be provocative towards the Russian government, but ultimately, I mean, Russia has nuclear weaponry in the Kaliningrad Oblast, pointed
Right,
at
and
Western
Belarus.
governments. Yeah, exactly. So, like, does that mean we get to just bomb the shit out of Kaliningrad? No,
Right,
that's not how it fucking works. That's your sovereign territory. You can have missiles there. Polish territory is Polish territory. If it wants to have missiles there, that's not your decision to make in Moscow.
yeah, and it's basically the same thing as with Ukraine to begin with. Even if Ukraine has had the biggest Nazi problem in the universe, okay, every second citizen in Ukraine would be a Nazi sympathizer. That is still a Ukrainian internal problem to
Yeah.
solve, not Russia's to
Mm.
invade and denazify.
Also, the and this goes for a lot of kind of what are termed as like anti-terrorist actions. Um, Against whether it be actual terrorists or otherwise, is that you're not going to defeat terrorism, be it Nazi terrorism or Islamist or whatever, with bombing civilian territories. You're just going to create more people who hate you. So, for instance, with what's happening in Gaza right now,
Mm-hmm.
if you wanted to drain support from Hamas, what you shouldn't do is bomb people's
Just to
houses. Because
create
if you take
more
yeah,
recruits.
if you take a person who might be very moderate and doesn't hate Israel, and then you bomb his house and kill his children, is he more or less likely to join an organization from which he might be able to get revenge against you?
Oh,
And the
probably.
same is true. And the same is true in Ukraine. Like you say, in your hypothetical, where the Nazis was this huge part of Ukraine, if the Nazis are the ones you're fighting against and you kill innocent people, those innocent people's friends and families are going to join the side that's going to potentially give them an
Defend them.
opportunity to revenge. Yeah, so you're just creating more
Nazis.
Nazis, or at least more people who will fight with the Nazis. So how does that actually denazify anything?
Yeah, and of course, if you're gonna denazify a country, you probably should not use neo-Nazi units to do it.
No, no, the Wagner Group and
The
their ilk.
Rusic, the Rusic
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. Or
Like you probably should not
the
sick
horrific
neo-Nazi groups at civilians. No.
yeah the butchers of queer people in Chechnya and places like that. Don't use those kind of organisations because that's not denazifying. That's Nazifying. You
Yeah.
have sent more Nazis to Ukraine than were already there.
Yeah. That definitely. Yeah. And of course the mass graves of civilians.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I mean, this is it's not even a new thing. We saw with going back to Bucha and various other places
yeah.
in Ukraine. The Russian government have committed genocidal acts of slaughter
And
on
of
innocent
course
civilians.
um, the taking one children from one group to the other.
Yeah, transference of children. So yeah, like that's not even a point I made against the Israeli government, but one that can be made against the Russian government is the forcible transference of children from one group to another,
And
which is
now
one of the five.
there's a whole new thing that has emerged in the occupied areas in the I think Luhansk. In Luhansk, I have it somewhere around here. That women who do not accept um, Russian passports, who give birth in the hospital, they're threatened with their newborn children being taken away.
Jesus fucking Christ! It's like they're trying to be as evil as possible.
Yeah,
The
and that's
fuck is
also
going
ticks one of the genocide convention points, making it sort of difficult or impossible, like the reproduction within the group.
Yeah,
Because
yeah, exactly.
if you say if you're not Russian, then your children, newborn children, are being taken away, then that's just destroying the reproduction within the group.
Yeah, the was it meant to prevent births in the group?
Yeah.
Now, technically, that doesn't mean prevention of births, but if they're going to be taken from the group,
Well,
then
if
they're not
yeah,
birthed
they're not
within the
gonna be
group.
born as members of the group. They're gonna be born as Russians. So
Yeah,
it does prevent the births within the group. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So either way, yeah, they're definitely hitting all five
So
markers
just
for
like
genocide.
with, I'm probably going to have to prepare a whole document on the genocide that Russia is doing against Ukraine, but there a lot is happening. It's and again, all of it could have been prevented if more decisive, more swift, and in greater quantities of aid would have been given. Like the Abrams tanks, yes.
Yeah,
Like the U.S. has apparently thousands of them, more than the U.S. could do anything with. Like a lot of them will not be used apparently out of those thousands, and then Ukraine is given 30. So like you can see the frustration here, right?
yeah.
Like if
I mean,
Ukraine should be
the
given like
front line.
200, 300, or even 500.
Yeah, exactly. The Ukraine. You got to bear in mind, it's the largest country that's entirely in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
The front stretches over. It must be close to 1,000 miles because it curves all around the central plateau of Ukraine. It's huge. To send 30 tanks won't do anything.
Yeah, it's just
30,
it's
30 tanks might be able to control a city, but Ukraine's got a dozen places that are being besieged. You
yeah,
know?
and it becomes a huge problem, like with the anti-air, where Ukraine has to choose selectively which cities will be defended. But and that becomes a strategy of war for Russia. Russia starts bombing cities, which the anti-air has not always been enough for that. And cities have to function normally for the economy to function normally, for life to function as normally as possible. So those
Yeah.
cities, those biggest cities, because there are many cities that don't get that luxury because there's no anti-air, get defended. But that means that, for example, there's not enough anti-air for critical infrastructure, electricity, or even the front line itself.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. Exactly, yeah.
and that's
Um.
just
Yeah. Okay. Is there any further point? Because I did want to move on to some other content. So, is there any last points you wanted to make before we kind of wrap up here?
uh, yes, help me become a big streamer. Because I'm a growing streamer. I'm a
Yeah.
small streamer for being the biggest Polish trans streamer. And
Well, yeah, we can help with that. Everyone go and check out Lucy Haza, or I suppose for Angloids, it's
Hayes.
spelt Lucy Hayes.
Yeah,
Okay,
because apparently
HAZD.
I've been told that Hayes is better than Haze because Lucy Hayes sounds like a cyberpunk character.
It does. It does sound like a cyberpunk character. Yeah, you should do that. You should have like a VTuber thing of a cyberpunk chick
And
or
that
whatever. Yeah.
I give people the good, the future drugs.
Yes, but obviously for terms of service reasons, no.
Of course.
Yeah.
I, you never know. Maybe the future drugs are totally legal and kosher.
Yeah, it's all legal. In the future, all of the drugs are legal. Let's go.
True.
Yeah. Yeah, everyone go and check out Lucy on the various platforms. Links in the chat there. Thank you for coming on, and we'll chat again at some point. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Bye bye. Now I have to. Hold on. Now I have to turn this off. How do I turn this off? Okay. Boom. Boom. What? What? So how did that go? Also, I have to disconnect myself. How did it go? Wait, hold on. I have to. Oh gosh. I knew this would happen. Hold on. I have to. Off. Now I can get in here. Okay, that worked. So, how did that go?